Hello, I'm Jennifer Ladd, and I'm talking today with Lieutenant General Karsten Heckel, the Commanding General of Marine Corps Combat Development Command and the Deputy Commandant for Combat Development and Integration. General Heckel, I'm interested in how the Marine Corps is balancing its crisis and contingency response mission with ongoing modernization efforts. I was wondering to start off if you can tell me a little bit about the progress of force design and some of the modernization that's going on with that.
Yeah, Jen, so good afternoon, and thanks for taking time with us. But I would say, having been in the seat now for going on 3 years, and kind of at the center of all things force design, I can tell you that we're in a very, very good place right now. And quite frankly, I'm pretty happy with where we are on all things modernization on force design, and we're actually at the direction of the Commandant, General Eric Smith. We've actually tried to accelerate certain components, and we're seeing success there. Obviously, all this is going to be underpinned by a budget, so that's a big piece to keep into consideration. But if you're familiar, I think you are familiar with Project Convergence Capstone 4 that just concluded, run by the Army Futures Command out in Camp Pendleton, San Diego. We participated very heavily in that. And we had a few of our gadgets, if you will, out there participating in PCC4. We had the Stern Landing Vessel, which, as you know, is an industry vessel that we contracted Hornbeck Offshore, and they dramatically modified the vessel to make it a stern landing. So it's a beachable, beach-to-beach connector, and we couldn't be happier with it. So we had it out at PCC4, participating in the exercise, and we also had our autonomous low-profile vessel out as well, which is nothing more than a narco sub. We took a page out of the Drug Runner's Handbook. There's the semi-submersibles are very, very difficult to track. And they're fairly inexpensive. This one is, as it said, autonomous low-profile vessel. We actually had a cook from CLR4 actually write the software and oversee the movement of the ALPV from San Diego Harbor up to Camp Pendleton. He did that with a little less than 30 days training, so we're super happy with that as well. So, and the biggest part we've contributed, I think, now is, as you know, is establishing, maintaining, connecting, and closing kill webs, and we did that on multiple occasions at PCC4. We see that as probably the greatest value proposition of the stand-in force for part of force design. So we couldn't be happier. As far as balancing with crisis response, when anybody tells me, and particularly in this job, when anybody uses the word balance, I automatically start thinking of money. So how am I going to balance money, modernization, resources versus other things? In the case of crisis response, obviously, when you use the term crisis response, it certainly makes the point that it's a time critical event, right? So there has to be a serious sense of urgency for the Marines. That sense of urgency is answered in the form of being persistently forward deployed if and when the crisis happens. And for Marines, that means being on board amphibious warfare ships of an amphibious ready group, an ARG, which is 3 amphibious warfare ships. So that's how we address crisis response. I will just say that as everybody is most likely aware, I know you are, the 26th Marine Expeditionary Unit experienced multiple extensions toward the end of their deployment. It was the 26th MU and Bataan ARG, amphibious rating group, and they got extended simply for all the events going on in both the Red Sea and with what's going on in Gaza and Israel. It truly is a Marine Expeditionary Unit aboard an ARG is truly the Swiss Army knife in the pocket of any combatant commander, and he or she can use that unit across multiple mission sets, crisis response to include escalating into conflict. I don't know if that answers the question.
Yes, sir. Well, and the MU, the Marine Expeditionary Unit, if I'm not incorrect, the 26th MU deployed when it first left North Carolina. It was sort of thought that they were going to spend a lot of time in the Mediterranean, maybe support things near Ukraine or Russia, and then because of what happened in Israel, Gaza, and the Red Sea, they moved down. Well, I think the Red Sea first. They moved down there, and so I feel like that might be a good example of just sort of what the MU's capabilities are and how it can respond quickly. It was already out there, so it was able to get to some of these places a little bit faster than sending somebody from the United States or from a base somewhere else. Is that,
Yeah, I mean,
is that,
yeah. To your point, Jen, I mean, it shows the real versatility of these things. And again, I'm a CH-46 pilot, V-22 pilot by trade. So I literally grew up as a young company grade and field grade officer deploying on amphibs, and my deployments were all to the Mediterranean Sea. And in 1994, when things got dicey in Mogadishu after Black Hawk Down, the MEU off the West Coast was steaming there, but the tyranny of distance with the Pacific, it was going to take a while. So they were able to move us down. Literally, we had 8 hours notice, and we were going through the Suez Canal, and in less than 96 hours, we were off the coast of Mogadishu, at least around the Horn of Africa. So I mean, the true versatility, to your point, and then what you bring with those ships, with the embarked Marine Expeditionary Unit, which has a battalion landing team, highly trained, proficient base infantry unit that trains to a higher level of skill set. And then you have the aviation combat element, the logistics combat element to support all this. And then all the command and control that goes with it, right? So a real versatile tool that can address a lot of different issues that combatant commanders face.
Going along with the force design in general, last year it was announced that you were going to restructure and shrink all the infantry battalions. I was wondering if that restructuring is done and what's the feedback on that, or if there's still some experimentation going on.
So what we did with IBX Phase 1, which was the initial one, we took the infantry battalions down to 735. Mm-hmm. Feedback we got from multiple exercises, and just that there was a battalion in every single division that did this and did a different structure size of an infantry battalion. So simultaneously we got direct feedback by, with, and through the fleet. And what was identified to myself and to at the time, Lieutenant General David Furness in Plans, Policy, and Operations, we realized that we have a thing called the ground board where all 4 division commanders come and brief us. And what we realized was that we took the infantry battalion probably too far, which is okay, right? It's like General Berger used to say, failing and failure are 2 different things. Trying something new and failing and then learning is okay. And that's what we did. So we added back, before Berger departed as commandant, we added back to 811. That experimentation is still going on. We've just concluded IBX Phase 2, and we're going to have a lot of good feedback on that, and we'll make the next iteration. Yes, experimentation is still going on. But I just want to paint an overarching brush on this, that there's a larger issue affecting everything right now, and that is with recruiting and accessions, okay? So regardless of what I decide the size should be, now the challenge is going to be, can we fill it, as you know?
That makes sense. Now, as far as the littoral regiment. So the Marine Corps now has 2 Marine littoral regiments, the 3rd MLR, which was designated in 2022, and 12th MLR, which was just converted in November. Can you talk a little bit about the purpose of the MLRs and how those are progressing?
So I'll just start off by saying that an MLR, a Marine littoral regiment, is nothing more than a MAGTF.
Okay.
If the one thing that gives the Marine Corps its ultimate, incredible flexibility, adaptability, applicability is we tailor all Marine Air Ground task forces to the scenario or situation that a particular combatant commander is trying to deal with. So my job is to organize, train, and equip for the commandant, to oversee that as the requirements officer of the Marine Corps, and then provide those forces to a combatant commander to be employed in the way they see fit. In the case of Admiral Aquilino and the previous Supreme Allied Commander of Europe, both of those combatant commanders were very, very pleased with what we were doing in their theaters of operation. For the MLR, it is focused on a maritime dominant theater, which is going to drive a force to certain considerations, but all from assumptions, constraints, and restraints, right? So that's how we built this force, specifically to operate in and focused on sea control as part of the naval campaigning and as a fleet Marine force. So, and sea control is everything from the seabed all the way to space. So it's a big order to fill, but we're getting after it, and we want to be able. As we under the direction of the combatant commander, those Marines, those MLRs are participating in the naval campaigning going on in the Pacific. This is how we're going to contribute.
Okay. Now, so there's 2 already, and when there's going to be 3 total? Is that correct? When is the next one going to launch?
Yeah. So the next one will be in Guam, because so we've got Hawaii, Okinawa, and then Guam, and there will be a third, and it's going to be in 25, right? 25.
Okay. In Guam. All right.
And all of that is on track right now. Again, just with the overarching concern of people, because it's all about the Marines, it's all about the people, right? So.
Right. Well, as you mentioned, the recruiting and retention, making sure you have enough people for all of these, infantry battalions and MLRs and everything else.
Spot on.
Yes. Okay. Moving on to mobility and naval integration, you mentioned amphibs before, and you had, of course, you and other senior Marine leaders have previously talked about the state of the amphibious fleet and how it's harmed your ability to respond to crises. So do you feel like that's improved? I know that now the Navy has updated its shipbuilding plan to include 31 amphibs, but has it improved, for like the short term?
The Navy is working very hard. And this is not a problem that can be fixed quickly. It didn't happen overnight. It's not going to be fixed overnight. It happened over the course of, honestly, decades. And to be honest with you, part of this responsibility rests with the Marine Corps, because we, for 2+ decades, we answered the nation's call. We went to war in the Middle East, Iraq and Afghanistan, and we kind of became detached from our naval roots, and we're back to that now, which I'm very happy about. So, if things don't receive attention, if they don't receive the requisite care, and then things are going to happen. But I will tell you, across the fleet, it's not just an amphib thing. The Navy is working very hard to maintain the readiness of all their fleet, because as things age, you have problems. You're balancing, just like you and I talked about, balancing modernization with crisis response. The Navy has to do the exact same thing. And then when you plop on top of all of this, the Department of the Navy is the Columbia class submarine, which is a significant pressurizing effect. So I think they're working pretty hard. We will have gaps in the near term. We know that. We've identified them. Again, Plans, Policy, and Operations has identified those gaps where we literally will not have an East Coast or a West Coast MEU deployed for significant periods of time. And we're working hard right now to address those. We'll have the MEUs trained, and then it will be up to the combatant commanders how those MEUs are employed, whether we find alternate means, surface transport and employment, or otherwise. Does that help?
Yes. So the MEUs are still going to train. They may not deploy on a ship. Well, some of them won't right away, but they could potentially go on maybe a different kind of ship, or maybe fly somewhere if needed.
Exactly. And again, to the Navy's credit, where they've really been helpful. When I was a MEF commander, we used a TEPF, fast transport, to deploy to Palau, and just for campaigning and deterrence. And we put about 250 Marines on board there for 4 months, and it worked. Rave reviews from the battalion commander that came back, and even bigger rave reviews from the government of Palau. It was a hit. Koa Moana 2021, so really a big hit there. So I guess that highlights for you some of the options. And the Navy's working hard on keeping EPFs. We could utilize LCSs. Just so you know, for an example, in Capstone 4, we had a young Marine sergeant who I hung an impact ham on her chest on last Monday. She designed software that allowed her to cue a Gator radar, the ground air task oriented radar in K-Bay, Hawaii, from the bridge of the USS Savannah and LCS in San Diego, 2,500 nautical miles away. A sergeant did that. Impressive, right? So the LCSs are platforms we can employ as well. And then there's ESBs. So we've developed a littoral maneuver bridging solution here that we're executing now. It won't fully mitigate the risk that will be presented to us with these gaps, but we're going to mitigate it to the best possible way we can.
Okay. Now, you mentioned stern landing vessels. I was wondering if you could talk just a little bit about that, a little bit more about that. So those are those mostly to get Marines from like an amphib to the shore, or are they also taking Marines around? Will they be taking Marines kind of around and keeping Marines on the ship for a longer period of time than just, maybe how you would use a landing craft air cushion right now, or an ACV type situation?
Right. Well, so the stern landing vessel is the ones where the SLVs we have now are essentially forerunners of what the medium landing ship or LSM will be, which is going to be a pretty good sized vessel, right? It's going to carry a lot of gear a long way. And the way I like to think of it, when you get on an amphib for a deployment, that's your home, right? You live there, you sleep there, everything, right? That'll be the case on an LSM, or in this case, an SLV, which it will be able to hold Marines, not as many as we need, but that's not necessary for a prototype that we're using to refine our requirements. But you think more of yourself as a passenger. It's going to be temporary. I'm on here for 7 to 10 days, and it's the thing we're focusing on is intra-theater maritime mobility. So imagine in the Indo-Pacific, as vast as that is, within the first island chain, being able to move a lot of gear, bulk and weight, long distances reliably. And it's beachable. So I don't need a port. I go beach to beach. No port required.
Right, because I know that that's a big thing, and actually that does kind of move me to my question about the amphibious combat vehicle. I know there were some problems last year with surf zone operations, and I was just wondering sort of how the ACV is coming along, because that is generally from moving like from an amphib to the shore. That's how that would be used, or potentially moving them on the shore as well. But
not 100%, and we're not across the finish line with ACV yet and the surf zone issues, but we've made really good progress. You'll again, I'm not going to speak for a combatant commander for a MEF or a MAR4, but you'll see the ACVs out with the Muse, but we'll make a decision on whether we will allow them to go into the surf zone or not. Because remember, with an ACV, I can swim it out of the well deck, or I can put it on an LCAC or an LCU, right? So it doesn't necessarily have to go through the surf zone.
Okay. I was wondering how you could kind of get around that. So has that already been integrated into operations, or it's going to be relatively?
It will be. Yep.
Is there a time frame for that, or just?
Well, we're looking at 15th MEU right now, which is going out with the box yard, but right now we're a little delayed with the big deck getting out in the LPD. So more to follow on that.
Okay. Pivoting a bit to fires, can you talk about the Marine Corps' efforts to modernize its fires capabilities, and also how JADC2 may play into that as to fires?
Sure. Well, first of all, JADC2 is the overarching consideration of everything we do, whether it's sustainment, whether it's fire. So that goes without saying. I mean, if you can't plug into that forward edge, ecosystem of nodes, you're useless. So all that has to be done. And we've, again, with PCC4 and previous versions, we've already done that and proven that. So our version right now, the one that we're fielding is the Navy Strike Missile with the Nemesis, again, with the Navy Marine Expeditionary Ship Interdiction System. That will ultimately, what we're going to do is we're going to evolve the, and we have HIMARS going out, which is now we've replaced tubed artillery with long-range precision missiles. And we're following along, partnering with the Army in their PRISM, the longer range, ultimately to where we will be able to strike a maritime target. So all in part of sea control, but also in land attack as well. We're also going after loitering munitions. We've made a lot of progress there, but we've also had some stumbles. Industry, quite frankly, with our organic precision fires, OPF, loitering munitions, mobile off the back of, for instance, a JLTV, we've had some struggles from an industry perspective, but we're going to get that past that pretty quickly, and we'll keep that moving. So those are the big efforts right there right now. And again, we're pretty happy with where we are. And then one last, it's been in the news a little bit, but we're actually proceeding forward with BAE and putting a 30 millimeter cannon on the ACV with a very highly capable and refined fire control system on board that is also supported by AI. So it's exciting times.
Now, sir, you mentioned you're an Osprey pilot, and I was wondering what your thoughts are on the platform going forward in light of the recent fatal crashes and the months-long grounding of the plane. I know that's not your responsibility. You're not in charge of aviation for the Marine Corps right now, but just sort of your thoughts on the platform.
Yeah, so my confidence and faith in the aircraft is completely unwavering. I'll just use a quick example to highlight the capabilities of the platform and why we need it so desperately, and why combat commanders need it so desperately. And in 2003, we went into Iraq. I was the executive officer of a squadron. I flew one of the first missions for the 24th Marine Expeditionary Unit off LHA-4, USS Nassau. And we took off. We were about 60 miles at sea, and I barely had enough gas to make it to our airfield at Joliba. And so it was, and then now fast forward 5 years, 2008, and I'm in command of VMM 162, the 2nd B-22 Squadron. And the capability differences were so stark. It was, it literally, for the first few weeks I was there, it was really hard to fit into my head. I mean, an aircraft that I could take off from the airfield, cruise across the country multiple times, multiple landings at forward operating bases, at FOBs, all on one bag of gas. It was just astounding. So the capability is unrefutable. And I would say, I just read an article today in the Navy Info Times talking about the safety record of the V-22, or at least the author highlighted it, and how over the 100,000 flight hours, the safety misstep record of a V-22 is right dead center average with all of the rotorcraft in DoD. So we just got to get past this. We'll figure it out. They already have, as you know, they've lifted the no-fly. So I think they've probably discovered the root cause, and they've found ways to mitigate the risk. So, but again, the capability is unprecedented. I mean, what else can fly 1,000 nautical miles at a very high rate of speed, stop and land without a runway? And by the way, to highlight what we, talking about crisis response, look at what happened in Sudan and Khartoum, where we rode a razor's edge on flirting with disaster there, with about 100 American citizens and their families and other third country nationals moving 700 nautical miles one way across open, contested space, and we had to rely on other countries to make it happen. That's a mission that a Marine Expeditionary Unit with V-22s could have conducted in one period of darkness easily. So the capability is amazing, and we'll get back where we need to be. We need them back flying with MEUs and with our other forward deployed elements.
Okay. All right. Now you mentioned before just sort of the learning and changing things as you learn, like when we were talking about the infantry experiment, but I think just force design as a whole, it seems like the plan continues to not so much be changed, but updated, it seems like, as the years go on. Can you just talk about like how the Marine Corps is taking lessons from how things have gone so far, and maybe also taking lessons from, say, like Ukraine, what's going on in the Red Sea, Gaza, other, current events, and applying those to how you move forward for preparing for potential conflict with China or in the Pacific?
Yeah, sure. So I think the one thing we saw right away from Ukraine, and what we continue to see, is the value of low signature, agile, mobile, connected forces that are very low signature, how effective they are, and how survivable they are. The one thing we saw that in the early days of Ukraine, and so I think you had small groups of Ukrainian soldiers and others that were able to have significant impact on a much larger, much more capable platform. So, and again, to get back to the CJAD-C2, again, the Combined Joint All-Domain Command and Control is really critical, and that's an overarching concern that applies to every aspect of force design. So, and then if you look at what's happened in the Red Sea, that's called marginal sea control, right? I mean, look at what has happened to global commerce going through the Red Sea and the Suez Canal. So, I mean, those critical, to the point, the critical maritime terrain that enables true sea control. And that's the other part of force design that we've been focused on. As far as the learning piece, we have done from the beginning, before I even got into this seat, when General Berger and now Commandant Eric Smith, when we identify an area through our campaign of learning, which I run, which is never ending and cycles at a very high rate. It's experimentation by, with, and through the fleet, all providing feedback in as we continue to do the planning, programming, and budget execution process, which starts with me and building the plan. We've made iterations, whether it's been bringing back artillery, brought some batteries back, or whether it's adding additional aviation capability, which we've also done. We added back 2 VMMs under General Berger, and we also, under General Berger, added completely additive a 4th VMGR, the KC-130 squadron, and it's in Hawaii, right? So 16 KC-130Js to support our focus on dealing with the pacing threat as directed by our national defense strategy. So we iterate all the time. We continue to do that, as you highlighted, discussing the infantry battalion experimentation and exercise, and we're going to continue to do that, and it never stops. And so we had a lot of learning coming out of Project Convergence Capstone 4, and we'll incorporate that into our campaign of learning and make the appropriate adjustments.
Okay. Well, I know we've touched on a lot of different things, and you mentioned a couple different, well, actually more than a couple different types of new tech and things that might be coming online soon. Is there anything else that we might have not talked about, or anything else coming up this year in about the next year that we should be looking for, expecting from the Marine Corps, as far as tech or just changes in general?
No, I think we did touch on quite a few. I'm trying to think. The Marine Corps Warfighting Lab is going to continue. And as you know, the Warfighting Lab is also my futures directorate, and also the commanding general of the Warfighting Lab is the vice of Office of Naval Research, ONR. So we're involved in a lot of things, and there's a lot of exciting things that I can't talk about in this forum that we do with DARPA. And I also want to give a shout out to Project Replicator and Raider, as you know, the Rapid Defense Experimentation Reserve. That has been one of the things we fielded out at PCC4 was 10X, Tactical Edge Node Expeditionary. And this is on the back of a MRZR, and it is V-22 transportable. And it is a critical node to that CJAD-C2, and that was all through Raider. And we're really excited about where we're going with that. So I think we've touched on just about everything. So there's exciting times, but we're moving out on a lot more experimentation, and we're doing a lot of work in S&T. Okay.
And as you mentioned before, it sounds like we're on the right. You are on the right track as far as amphibious ships. We're at a different place now than last year as far as that goes.
You betcha. And again, it just requires constant attention, and I think we have a lot of support from on Capitol Hill. And I'll tell you, one last thing for you, something that should concern all of us is getting our industrial base back to being healthy the way it needs to be. We need to the maximum extent possible avoid, single points of failure, particularly from an industrial base perspective. So that's going to be a critical piece going forward to really getting this thing righted and permanently righted.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Lieutenant General Heckel, for taking your time to talk to us today and providing your insights. And thank you also to the audience for tuning in. Our State of Defense programming continues Thursday with General Randy George and more for the State of the Army, and we hope to see you there. For Defense One, I'm Jennifer Ladd.